9:42 with Dave, Jay, and Sam. And it's time for a little debate with the Herkimer County Sheriff hopefuls, Jim Palumbo and Dan Reardon, and Chris Farber, the sitting sheriff, on the phone today. And we can say hi to him as well. Jay, I know we wanted to greet him and welcome to the show.
Yep. Sheriff Farber, you there?
I am here, Dave.
Okay.
And Jay.
This is Jay.
Oh, Jay.
Hey, Sheriff. And Dan and Jim are in studio, and we'll start the debate. As we explain to these gentlemen, it's too bad that you couldn't make it in studio, but we will give each one of you guys a little opening statement, and then we'll go on with some questions. You'll get a chance to rebut. We did flip a coin here in studio. Fortunately, you weren't here, so you weren't able to choose. And Dan won the coin toss and gave it off to Jim.
He's deferred to Jim
deferred
to make the opening statement. Jim, explain a little bit about yourself for the next minute or so.
Good morning.
Okay, and go right ahead, sir.
My name's James Palumbo, candidate for Herkimer County Sheriff. I have 25 years law enforcement experience, along with 12 years as a corrections officer for the Herkimer County Sheriff's Department. I served 12 years as chief of police. I live here in the county of Herkimer my entire life with my wife, Sandra, and our daughter, Jamie, who is currently on her way to be a state corrections officer. During my years of experience and service on the police department as chief of police, I got nearly $1 million in grant funding. That funding was used for safety equipment for our officers, vehicles, drug investigations, and a lot of community programming, and worked with our school districts. We had the Cops in Schools program. We operated the first traffic safety office within a high school in the state of New York, actually, where we worked with the students to get their driver's license, pass their permit, worked with safety features, showing them safety features in vehicles.
All right, very good. And since we were talking about state fairs today, quickly, either the Herkimer County Fair or the State Fair, what's your favorite portion of a fair? What do you like best about the fairs?
Well, the fair is all about agriculture, and we're an agriculture county.
All right.
Agriculture is my point.
Very good. Dan Reardon, welcome to the show, and your opening statement, you're up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dan Reardon. I'm 59 years old, and I'm excited to be running for sheriff and bring 30 years of experience in law enforcement, corrections, investigations, homeland security, and administration. I was your Herkimer County Sheriff from 1985 to 1995, and as one of the youngest sheriffs ever elected, I put many vital programs in place which are no longer running. The current administration has been plagued with escapes. They've had deaths in the facility, and the comptroller even came in and did a report on guns missing or being not placed in the right spot, those type of issues. And also, I would revamp the pistol permit office, because it's taking people up to a year to get a pistol permit, and that's not right. When Chris decided to run for the assembly last year, he kind of opened the door to me and said that he was no longer interested in serving as sheriff. Many county legislators, county leaders, and friends have urged me to run. If elected, I will make my first priorities to reinstate a much-needed countywide drug task force, reinvigorate the welfare fraud program, investigations unit, revamp the pistol permit office. I have my experience as a commissioner for the State Commissioner of Corrections, and I'll help build a facility that meets long-term needs. I know how to get it done. I helped other counties. I will also improve law enforcement and patrol on the Fulton Chain of Lakes, and improve policies and procedures at the department.
All right, and how about the fair? How about the fair question for you too? What do you like most?
It's got to be agriculture. I raise some beef cows myself. I got a few horses, so I'm an ag man.
All right, and as for Acting Sheriff Farber, your opening statement, sir, on the phone.
Okay, I'm Sheriff Chris Farber. I've been sheriff for 12 years. I was town justice for 20 years in the town of Little Falls, and I operated a successful business for 24 years. I've instituted a lot of different programs, new programs in Herkimer County Sheriff's Office, got rid of some of the ones that didn't make sense, that were established by a previous administration, that were too expensive to run, and really didn't make sense for our county. As far as the assembly race, when I was approached to run, Dan Reardon called me at home, said he was interested. I told Dan Reardon, go ahead. I love my job as sheriff. The statement he made is incorrect. As far as the pistol permit office, the funds, the money, the budget's controlled by the legislator. And every year we go to budget, I ask for things. If they don't give me the money, I can't provide the services. That's what it boils down to. Give me more money, we'll provide more service. That's what it is. But your taxes are going to go up also.
All right. And what's your feeling on state fairs and the Herkimer County Fair? What's your favorite part?
Agriculture. I love the dairy princesses, the dairy queens, everything about the fair. I've been going there since I was young. The animals, agriculture is one of our leading industries in Herkimer County, and I think the Herkimer County Fair Association does a great job promoting agriculture in Herkimer County.
All right. And quickly, you said that Dan's statements were false. What were you referring to specifically?
The assembly race. When he said that I was no longer interested in sheriff and I wanted to run for assembly, that was incorrect because Dan called me home before I announced and said he was interested in running, and I told Dan, go ahead. Go ahead. I love my job as sheriff.
All right.
If somebody had to get in the race in case our assemblywoman won against Richard Hanna, that opened up our seat. I was approached. I was asked to run. As a matter of fact, Dan encouraged me to run. He said, well, it's natural progressive for the sheriff to run for assembly. And he said, go ahead.
All right, Dan, your response to
Absolutely. I
Sheriff
think
Farber.
Chris got parts of it right. Chris called me when he heard that I was approached about running for the assembly spot. I told Chris that, you know what, you've been involved in politics. If you want to run, go for it. I can understand you wanting to do that. So go for it if that's what you want to do. He did it. I didn't do it. You didn't see my name out there. I didn't come out and announce I was running. He chose to do that. He didn't have to do it. If he loved the sheriff, he could say, I don't want to run for the assembly, guys. You run somebody else, or don't run anybody because I'm happy being sheriff. I had the opportunity back in the 90s when the late Senator Jim Donovan passed. Mm-hmm. My name was brought about to run for the state Senate seat. I chose not to do that because I enjoyed being sheriff and wanted to continue to be sheriff.
All right, Jim, your first question, all about the Herkimer County Jail that's being proposed, and there's been some site proposals, and there's a little bit of a discussion going on between the county and the village. Where do you come down on that whole discussion?
Well, if I was the sheriff, I think one of the main purposes I would serve would be right from the bottom, the ground up. Okay, you have to make sure the parcel of property that they're going to buy is big enough to use it to hold expansion in the future. I mean, you can't buy a piece of property big enough to hold a jail that we want to build today. It's got to be big enough for a jail that's going to be added on to 30, 40 years down the road, so we're not in the same predicament we are today. When you build that jail, you got to make sure the infrastructure is ready to connect on any additions. You got to make sure your jail is set up to hold or to handle double the population, like all your common areas of the jail, the dining facilities, the kitchen facilities, the radio room, the library, rec areas. They all should be double the size of what you intend to use it for today.
All right, Dan, your chance to chime in on the jail.
Yeah, Jim's correct. You've got to look at the blueprint of the facility, if it's going to fit the location, not only there in expansions, what have you. Also, you need to be talking to the neighborhood. If it's going to go into a certain area, you've got to sit down and talk to the neighbors and address their concerns.
Okay, and Sheriff Farber, your take on the jail system there.
Well, as you know, I've been sheriff for 12 years, and for 3 years we worked on a jail design. We have a jail design, all complete. We worked on it with a group of legislators and the State Commission of Corrections. Every step we took was approved by the commission. The core of the facility is large enough. God forbid we ever have to add on to the jail, but if we had to, the core of the facility, kitchen, storage, officers' quarters, things of that nature, HVAC, they're all large enough to be able to add on. And I agree with Jim Palumbo that, if you buy a piece of property, it better be big enough so you can build on to the future. But we have a very efficient jail design all done.
All right. Dan, your question this time. You brought up the drug task force in your opening comments there. Would you like to expand on that a little more?
Sure. Back again when I was sheriff the first time I started a drug task force. I received some grants, we had deputies, hired some local PDs, officers as part-time deputies. We got CNET involved. We got the local PDs involved, their investigators, and we created a drug task force to work throughout the county. It's something that's needed right now. The Valley PDs are, like every community, are strapped for funds. They can't dedicate a lot of resources to such, but they do the best they can. I would go after grants to address this issue, to try to revitalize it. And also, if I couldn't get the grants, I'd go to the county legislature and say, this is an issue. Because when I was going door to door circulating petitions to get on the ballot, people were telling me there was a drug issue, there's a drug house here, there's a drug problem over here, and, you know, they need help. So I would try to do that.
All right. And Jim, is a drug task force the best use of resources to fight this problem? What's your take on this matter?
I think a task force needs to be in place, but I think it has to start with a firm leadership in the task force. The last task force we had sort of fell to pieces. I was a member of the original task force, and we pulled out because it was not working proper, and we had our own task force. And one of the biggest thing is you can't just pull people in and say, you're going to be a drug investigator. You have to train them. They have to be trained. They have to know what they're doing. They have to be responsible. They have to be loyal. They have to keep their mouth shut.
All right. And Chris, does your viewpoint on the drug task force differ from these gentlemen at all?
Well, the drug task force was dissolved before I became sheriff. As Dan stated, he started that drug task force, and there were numerous issues that happened, and that's why it was dissolved. As far as grants, that's a wonderful thing, but grants cost you money. You need personnel. You've got to have personnel. And like any other agency right now, we are hurting for personnel. And again, the funds are controlled by the legislator. We did talk about a drug task force at one time, maybe a couple years after I was sheriff, and it didn't come about. Very difficult to run. You have to have a competent person on that task force that can oversee it and make sure everything is being done correctly. Until that happens, we take tips, we pass them on. We also work with CNET right now. We pass tips on to the other local PDs that we get, and we do all that we can to combat the drug situation, and we even put a drug drop box for prescription drugs in our because prescription drugs are a big problem right now.
All right.
And we put a drop box in our office so people can bring in their unused and unwanted prescription drugs.
All right, Sheriff Farber, next question's for you, and it's about consolidation. So some of the short staffing going on and department cuts and budget cuts. Is there a room for consolidating with other municipalities? What's your opinion on that?
Well, as you know, the town of Frankfort and the village of Frankfort, I signed a letter of support to the state for them to consolidate, to get money to consolidate, because that does make sense there. There are a lot of other issues. The salaries. We're the lowest paid law enforcement agency in the county, Herkimer County Sheriff's Office is. And there's a variation of salaries. So when you start combining, there's a lot of issues that come up. Well, what's the pay going to be? There's a lot of union issues that come up. I attended some of the meetings, but from what I saw, some of the chiefs said they weren't not interested in. And one of the other municipalities said that they weren't interested at this time in combining and consolidation.
All right, and Dan, how do you feel about consolidation and balancing all of that with constituents and their issues, and of course the staff that you have to manage as well?
You're right. I attended some of those meetings also, and listened. And the concept sounds great. They want to consolidate into one large PD. And it's never been done before, because what has always been done in this state is that a village has been assumed by a town by a county, to a larger department. What they're attempting to do would be create one police department from Frankfort to Dallasville, the way they talk. And it's never been done. It's going to take a lot of work to do it. They at least are bringing people together to talk about it. So they need someone to help put together the facts, to help give them ideas, and I can provide that. I think it's a good concept to have they refer to it as a Metro PD, so it's to help build something like that. And there are issues of finances and what have you. But you have to get the people. First, we got to talk about it. Can be done. Is everybody on board? And it's not just the chiefs that we have to talk to. We got to talk to the local elected officials and the constituency to explain to them and lay it out to them and say, do I want to invest into it or not? They have the choice to do that.
All right. And Jim, what are your thoughts on consolidation?
Well, from what I got out of most of the meetings is everybody's all looking for their piece of the pie. And the pie is made up from several different pieces, which they all got to contribute. I think that consolidation would make sense if they started out small, sort of like the village and town of Frankfort. Go by your townships. The next one would be town of German Flats. You got the village of Ilion, then you got the village of Mohawk. If you get them 2 towns on board, you could move into Herkimer, the town of Herkimer. The village of Herkimer would have to get with the town of Herkimer and see if they wish to expand. And then move off from there. Once every town is maybe consolidated with each other of their own communities, then maybe they could look further down the road at further expansion or consolidation. I think the role that the sheriff can do is provide some leadership, provide some direction. And I think there's ways, everybody talks about budgets, but if you look at a budget's a document that you have to make work. And there's ways right now that we could provide more services with the same amount of money.
All right, quickly now, with the last couple of minutes of the debate for the Herkimer County Sheriff's primary, Sheriff Farber, your statement on the state controller's findings that that the inventory was not adequately provided for and did not account for property room. Do you have a statement on that with regard to the state controller's study?
Oh, absolutely. They claimed that there was 1 gun missing, and that took place in 2000, before I was sheriff. But there was no gun missing, and we have supporting documentation on that. As far as missing items, we ran out of room in our safe to put guns, so we had a secure evidence locker that the guns were in. But because they weren't, and it was right next to the door to the safe. Our county attorney was over here, our county administrator was over here. I walked him through the whole thing, and it was basically a witch hunt, because I opposed the SAFE Act. And I believe that brought the audit to Herkimer County, because I was the first sheriff to stand up against the SAFE Act.
All right, Jim, your chance to rebut the sheriff's comments with regard to instilling confidence in the community once again over this issue.
What I find hard to believe is that I became chief in 1992, and each of these gentlemen have been in that sheriff's office. I started computerizing my department at that time, and everything went on computer, all of our inventories, all of our records and everything. I find it hard to believe that in this day and age, we're still talking about computerizing the sheriff's department, talking about improving divisions within the sheriff's department by computerizing it. I just don't understand how we are so far behind the times.
All right, and Dan, your final statement on this matter.
Yeah, Chris alluded that he's first opposed the SAFE Act. However, he takes a party line called the Working Families Party, which is a complete opposite of what the Republican Party stands for. He's the endorsed candidate. They're a liberal, left-wing group based in Brooklyn, New York, that their goal is to take out, to elect progressives for the state Senate and get rid of all the Republicans, so downstate will control everything. So we think you oppose the SAFE Act and all that, you can't take a party line that's for the SAFE Act. That's the way I look at it.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Gentlemen, thanks for your help today. Best of luck in the primary. Sheriff, thanks for your time on the phone as well.